Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome yet again to this episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your regular host, Chef Andy, and today we are going to be going nice and simple. We're going to be making a vegetarian meal which will be including a bit of peas, and we're going to be serving that with some steamed rice. Now before we get to that part, I will begin by introducing the ingredients before us, starting from the very front. From the right end there, or your left, we have some minced garlic, some minced ginger, and some curry powder. And right behind that there is some turmeric powder, some mixed herbs, and some paprika powder. I'm also going to be using some frozen peas, one large carrot, about 4 pieces of peeled and rinsed potatoes. I'm also going to be adding to that some coriander leaves, fresh of course, 2 large tomatoes. You'll also require about 1 cup of basmati rice, 1 large red pepper, and 1.5 pieces of red onion. We're going to give you a chance now to freshen up, grab your pens and papers if you're taking notes, and when we come back, we're going to dive right into it. So don't touch that down. We'll be right back. Welcome back ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who missed out on the introduction, we're going to be working on some peas stew, and we're going to be serving that with some steamed rice. Before we get to that point, I will begin by heating up our pot of water. Remember, you are going to be making some rice, so very handy that you begin by heating up your water. And for that you will need to measure out about 1 large cup of water. And proceed to add that to your pot. Lid on, and proceed to allow that to come to the boil. And while that continues, we're going to proceed to do every other thing that's remaining for the stew, and that will incorporate a bit of some onions. So proceed by chopping up some red onion. Be sure to chop it very finely. One very simple trick to always get your onions chopped really quick and fast is to always do it in a very slow and consecutive motion. That way you will actually always get the same result. And of course, for those of you who occasionally email us and message us about reasons as to why you'd actually tear when you peel your onions, as I mentioned, I will share some tips with you, and you may be able to actually see it in our previous episodes. It's a very simple trick. Always core out the root end of the onion, slit the top, cut it, slice it into half, and then proceed to chop your onion, and you should actually be able to do so without having tears in your eyes. Alternatively, you can either rinse it under the sink, under some running cold water, and proceed to chop, or you can throw your onions in the freezer, and that will actually allow for you to chop without having to have your tears coming out all the way down your face. So first off, proceed by adding, or rather getting your pan hot. For that you will also require to add a bit of some cooking oil. I'm going to be using vegetable oil for this recipe. You can alternate that for canola or olive oil. It won't make much of a difference. And to that I'll proceed to add my onions. And just do the same for the other half. Also proceeding to chop very finely. Now to add your last and final bit of your red onion. Of course, at this stage, you do need to allow your onions to sweat out a little bit. Cook them continuously on medium to low heat, allowing them to really color gently. And while that continues, proceed to grab your garlic and your ginger that's already minced. Basically, one particular easy advice I could give or tip that I could share with you, very handy when you're making your stew or any particular stew for that matter, to actually build your ingredients and your dish very gently. One particular technique I like to use when making my stew is I always start my temperature very low and continue to raise the degrees or the level of my heat once the liquid is in, so that you can actually be able to steam everything in together. So very handy tip there. If you're going to be making a stew or if you're going to be cooking, always start, if you're not going to be frying directly, you can actually start your heat very low or medium and then continue to gradually increase it. That way you will actually be able to maintain the color of your onions and your garlic and ginger. Right, once that's done, we're going to proceed to add all our aromatics. So I'm going to begin with some curry powder and some turmeric for color. And we'll also be adding a bit of that paprika, small pinch of course. And now you can switch those around. Now proceed to fry that continuously. You may actually be able to get those beautiful hints of the spices in the room. Very important to actually give your spices a bit of a fry, or rather just heat them up on the pan to really activate the flavors. And once that's done, proceed to add just a little bit of water. As I always mentioned, water or any liquid, maybe even chicken, beef or fish stock, always really allows for you to really combine the flavors in the pan. Also allows you to cool off your pan slightly while cooking, allowing you to really get full control of your dish. So at this particular stage, I'm cooking this at medium to low heat. You should actually be cooking that almost into a pasty consistency. While that continues, we'll proceed to blitz a bit of our large tomatoes. So I'm going to be throwing those into my jug here and blend them really quickly. So just cut those into 4 large quarters. You can add a little bit of water at the bottom of the jug. That should actually allow for the tomatoes to juice up very well. And proceed to blend that very gently. Also give your jug a shake. If your tomatoes are still a little chunky in size, you can proceed to add a little bit of liquid as well. That will help them break up very quickly. And you can also be able to achieve that same consistency using a food processor. So next up, your tomatoes. Remember, they're not completely pureed. They're just quite a little chunky. So once that's in, proceed to raise your temperature slightly to medium. giving it one nice thorough mix. And now allow for the dish to come to the boil. While that continues, we are going to be adding a bit of carrots, so proceed to chop those up. So begin by first cutting lengthways into half, and then proceed to chop that diagonally with your knife right in front of you. Proceed to slice those very, very thinly. Proceed to do the same for the other slices. Up next, proceed to add your carrots to the dish. And next up, you can proceed to half your potatoes, cutting across from the wheat side. Proceed to do so all the way to the very end. Once that is done, proceed to grab your wooden spoon and begin to mix everything together. And you can at this point proceed to cover your pots. This will actually allow for the temperature to really build up a little faster in there, and it'll also give you a bit of extra heat for you to be able to steam your potatoes and to tenderize those carrots rather a little faster. But while that continues, I'm just going to get our pot with the water back on the heat. And next we're going to do the rice. So very, very importantly, begin by adding a little bit of oil. That should allow for a very, very beautiful texture for your rice. Also very crucial, always add your salt in at this stage. You can wiggle your pot around a little bit just to help you dissolve the salt very quickly. And then proceed to add your rice. And just to give it a bit of that beautiful aroma. Remember, white rice is actually very, very bland to look at, so it's always handy as well to add a little bit of some herbs if you have some, or any particular food coloring. It will actually break the monotony of having very, very white rice. So very quickly assemble your coriander on the board, pressing firmly and gently, and proceed to chop that very, very finely. Be sure to also discard the stalks. You don't really want to add those anywhere into your rice. And proceed to add your coriander. Grab a spoon and very gently just mix that in, just up till the point you have almost all the coriander leaves submerged in the liquid. And now proceed to the last and final step of cooking your rice by putting a lid on it. I particularly like to use this brand of pots for the fact that it does come with a little nozzle fitted right on top of your lid. It does allow for your steam to escape if you do have an excess of it. So if you can actually be able to grab one of these, it will come very, very handy in making very good rice. But if you can't find one, I'm sure your pots that you already have will do just the trick. So we're going to also now give this another quick stir and also take the lid off. As you can see, it actually really helps to bring the heat a little higher. Now we're going to proceed to mix that as we just did, and then to add our last and final ingredient for the stew, we're going to throw in our frozen peas. So these have not been cooked, So remember, this is actually a stew. Remember, it is a stewing process, basically means cooking your dish in liquid. So we're going to be adding that in. Can give that a quick mixture just to make sure everything's evenly spread and coated with the sauce. And at this stage, you can proceed to add a bit more water, making sure to add water just up until you've just covered everything in the pot and it's actually right at the top of everything. Mix it through once more. And you can leave your lid on now and allow for that to cook for anywhere between 15 to 16 minutes, and that should actually be ready to serve afterwards. But before we get to that part, we will actually be adding a few other ingredients later on, but I will actually do that right after the break. We're going to take a short break now, but don't touch that dial. We do have a little more in stock for you. See you in a little while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just tuning in, we've been working on a very, very beautiful and very simple pea stew. We've also been doing our basmati rice and everything is now cooked. But we are going to finish that off very, very simply by incorporating a bit of our pepper. So always begin by taking off maybe one edge of the pepper. Be sure to always try and empty as much seeds out. And also maybe also core out those bitter white, actually that bitter white inside, and you should actually be able to do it very, very easily. So next up, we're going to proceed to cut some 1-inch rings. And now we're going to proceed to chop those into 1-inch cubes. Right, so that's done. So we're just quickly going to reheat the contents in our pan, which we're actually going to also be adding the peppers. But before we get to that part, we do have our basmati rice that's ready. And we're going to proceed to plate that in this clear bowl. So if you missed out on what we did with the rice, we began by steaming some water. We added some cooking oil and some salt. And then lastly, we added some chopped coriander. And you'll be able to see that from the pictures on the camera there. You will be able to see how that coriander really breaks the monotony of plain white rice. And particularly something also to remember, adding any herbs particularly to rice will actually give it quite a bit of difference in flavor. It will also be very, very visually accepting. So you can be able to see that from the cameras. And now just to bring your attention back to our pot with the stew, I'm going to give that a quick mix. And next up, just to finish it off, add some peppers. So I used about half a large red bell pepper for this recipe. You can also incorporate many other vegetables. As I said, it is a pea stew. You can actually incorporate many other ingredients to this dish. But do remember that if you are going to be calling a dish by its name, make sure the main ingredient in the name that you use is actually the one standing out. So if you can be able to see from the cameras there, one random scoop of the stew, you should actually be able to see quite a few peas in there for you to actually be able to accept it is a pea stew. So this is now done. We're just going to give it a few more mixes. Remember, the peppers went in very much lastly at the end. For this particular reason, we like to have our peppers nice, juicy, and with that bit of crisp. Remember, it is a stew. The peas will really cook to a very, very tender consistency, same as the potatoes and the carrots. and your pepper is actually now coming in to really break the consistency of the mix and actually give it a nice beautiful crunch. So we're going to proceed to scoop that into a bowl. I'm going to be using a nice big large clay bowl. Now proceed to scoop that in here, scooping out just about 3 ladlefuls. So this particular sizable portion should actually be able to cover 2, and you should actually have an extra portion there which you could actually also maybe add if you haven't had enough. But to that particular stage, we're going to finish it very simply by adding some coriander leaves. So I'm just going to proceed by just breaking off some of those leaves from the stems, and we can reserve the rest for later. All we are going to do at this stage is chop this very finely. And coriander, particularly for this dish, really gives a nice beautiful harmony to the peas and the potatoes, and it most of all just complements it visually. And all you need to do now is just sprinkle some of that beautiful fresh coriander right over the top, and your pea stew is ready to serve. I hope you've actually managed to learn something very new for you, particularly for the home viewers. I hope you actually will manage to be able to try this out on your own. Do also don't forget to send us your comments, your queries, or any particular issues pertaining the show. We are always very much willing and able to get back to you. So from the studios, thank you so much for tuning in today, and until the next episode, have a lovely evening and see you soon.